is an intellectual initiative of a group of scholars and activists to evolve a discursive community amongst themselves to arrive at a theoretical perspective from the vantage point of the marginalized people. The foundation aims to promote researchers in imagining new fields of study, raising funds for the purpose, and developing networks of scholars and activists for sharing their intellectual and social concerns. It supports a number of initiatives by forming working groups to facilitate discussion, research, and publications by members, as well as aspiring scholars interested in different themes. The Knowledge and Practice group was formed in 2003. Diversity has been the cornerstone of Asian societies, essentially due to the prevalence of varied knowledge systems and practices, with an objective to create a blueprint of the texts and practices specific to various traditions and societies. The Knowledge and Practice group came into being. There has been a continued engagement with the members of the group and varied practicing communities of respective knowledge and tradition across different parts of India, including NIAS and Mimamsa tradition of Mithila, Tantric tradition of Mayong, Assam, Sufi traditions located in the Silk Route between Afghanistan and India, tradition of 5 saints in the Buxar region that is celebrated in the form of Panch Kosi Mela, and Navya tradition of Bengal. I would now introduce our chair as well as our speaker for this session. Our chair, Dr. Ritu Priya, is a medical graduate with a doctorate in community health. She's a professor at the Center of Social Medicine and Community Health, Jawaharlal Nehru University. She was an advisor of the public health planning with the National Health Systems Resource Center, a technical support institution under the National Rural Health Mission, and has been a member of the task forces of the Planning Commission, Ministry of Ayush, and the National AIDS Control Organization. She was founder coordinator of the Transdisciplinary Research Cluster on Sustainable Studies at JNU. Her work links epidemiology, popular culture, and health systems research for decentralized planning, policy, formulation, and analysis of healthcare. It has been specifically focused on health of marginalized groups, problems of nutrition and communicable diseases, health systems development, health governance, and the politics of health knowledge, including relevance of traditional systems. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us today and for accepting to be the chair of the session. Our speaker for today's session is Rakesh Kumar, Research Associate, Conscious Studies Program, School of Humanities, National Institute of Advanced Studies at the Indian Institute of Science Campus, Bangalore. He's an archaeologist by training. He has completed his graduation and post-graduation in ancient Indian history, culture, and archaeology from Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi, India, and Deccan College Postgraduate and Research Institute, Pune. He's also pursuing his PhD on Indigenous Knowledge of Healing among the Nilambar tribes of Kerala. Thank you, Rakesh, for joining us today and sharing your idea and work with us. I'll give the floor to the chair and then we can start the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Shailja. And thanks for having me here. It's always interesting to hear young researchers and their work in new areas. Just to sort of lay the ground in a way that I come from public health. And one finds that in the interdisciplinary work in health studies, health, which is such a central human experience, is perceived in so many different ways and from so many diverse vantage points, often the different vantage points coming to contestations with each other, that makes it a complex and interesting phenomenon. As public health analysts, for example, we look at population level indicators, which represent health, longevity, mortality rates, etc., etc. And then we are at loggerheads with clinicians who use individual biomedical, physical, clinical, laboratory parameters. As individuals, we all look at our own health, self-perceive it with health markers such as feeling good or not feeling good, pain, functional ability, stamina and strength, symptoms of illness, and so on. So, these are all completely different vantage points, but they all are sort of coming together for healthcare in some ways. And that's where the links of these kind of perceptions of and representations of health with the kind of determinants and therefore the kind of health care that each one accesses, the coherence of the explanations leading to the healthcare measures from daily routines and diets to sophisticated medical technology to spiritual healing. You have a whole range of and mixes of all of these in very complex ways. And therefore, what we tend to get in, I'm really trying to just give a sense from the public health and health systems research end, public health data tends to ignore the medical pluralism almost completely. Till very recently, all our public health macro data sets did not look at it or did not analyze it. The dominant health systems research, even today, dismisses it completely. You have two parallel streams running, of traditional and of the health systems dominant framing. While anthropological studies show a much nuanced politics of knowledge and much use of medical pluralism. So that area which remains completely outside the scope of the public health kind of policy making and so on. And holistic health systems research is an area which is sort of on the margins of health systems research, but I think many of us are part of that kind of stream, which attempts to draw from all these understandings and bring them together into a more holistic and complex understanding. So it's among this complexity that then we can see the kind of area that Rakesh is, I think, going to be referring to, the uncodified traditions, non-codified traditions of knowledge, since from the lay people's socially, culturally constructed practices, we have the knowledge experts and practitioners, with so much standardization and regulation coming into all these expert systems, and thereby getting codified and also outside the common social realm in a way. And therefore the non-codified traditions have their own very specific space and very much alive and in practice. Each of these has very unique features, and each, when one hears about it every time, each one provides new insights. So I'm really happy to be here and to hear from Rakesh Kumar about his explorations into indigenous knowledge, health and healing.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for first of all accepting for the chairing this session. Thank you, Shailaja, for making this possible, all this talk possible. Thank you so much for the generous interaction. Thank you, sir, for creating this platform where I can come and people like me, young scholar like me, can come and discuss their own research. Thank you so much, all. So without any further ado, I'll like to share my screen and I'll switch off my video for some time being, so that it will be, there will be no bandwidth issues in that sense. And so as you all know, and ma'am has already laid a very nice background for my talk, and it made my work, my talk much more easier, so that I can now directly jump into this, what I am going to say. Thank you so much for this nice background for the research, what you are doing and which I'll be doing in my future. Thank you so much for introducing this to me. I have many things you have told. I have not think from the policy perspective right now. So in this talk, I'm not focusing on that policy point of view. But yeah, I'll be mostly talking about in this talk their knowledge system itself and how their belief, their worldviews, their cultural practices, which is associated with their worldviews and all. So before I go for my talk, I would like to sincerely share my gratitude. So my generous thanks to Professor Ritupriya ma'am for accepting this, chairing the session, Professor Manindranath Thakur sir for creating this platform where where the ideas can be discussed. Shailaja, of course, for making this possible. My supervisor, Professor Sangeeta Menon, for her continuous guidance and support during my PhD research. NIAS and Tata Trust for supporting my research. And all the community members, without them, this talk would not have been possible. For they come forward, they discuss their knowledge system with me, sharing their knowledge system with me. So thanks to all those members, and then all the members from FCSR and the Knowledge Practice Group. Thank you so much for joining today. So just to give an overview, what India celebrates the diversity of medical system in that sense. So this idea of putting this slide here is just to, it's a kind of disclaimer to say that, we celebrate much diverse medical traditions, and what we have the modern knowledge system is it's a long evolution process which has come through the trial and errors of exchange of our knowledge system from within the region, within the community, inter-community, intra-community exchange. So we have a very diverse and complex knowledge system, and medical knowledge system is not so different in that sense. It has also very diverse various, it has codified medical system, as ma'am has already told. It's a non-codified medical system, which sometimes is called as local health tradition. We have biomedicine, and which has, and then all these all traditions are have their own journey, they have their own importance, and they're equally important in that sense. So here, by no means during this talk, I'll be either glorifying or criticizing one of the other traditions. So this is not the goal here, but the goal here is just to focus on the research which I am doing here. And then since I'm doing the research on tribal healing tradition, so my talk focus mostly on the tribal healing traditions in that sense. So it's a kind of disclaimer slide to give an audience that what will be my approach throughout the talk. So now let's go to this presentation outline, what I'm going to talk for this next 20-25 minutes. So first I'll give an overview of Indian indigenous healing traditions, and then I'll talk about the indigenous knowledge system and the debate around the indigenous knowledge system and its dimension. Then I'll come back to my case study, which I am doing my research. And then I'll talk about this, what can be a future in that sense, because when we talk about the indigenous knowledge system, tribal knowledge system, we have a very set of notions that we think from the heritage point of view, mediumization of knowledge system, and then we try to look at those points. So I'll be highlighting on those problems and paradoxes in the last few slides. So before I go forward, I would like to share this story, which is very touching especially for me when I read this story, and it was very nice, and I'd like to read for the audience itself. Just to introduce Margaret Mead, she was a socio-cultural anthropologist from USA, and her research work was basically on socio and cultural aspects of the society. So once a student of Margaret Mead had asked her what she considered to be
Rakesh,
the
Rakesh,
yeah,
there's a request from audience that if you can be a little slower.
Okay. So basically, Margaret Mead was a socio-cultural anthropologist from USA, and once her student asked one question, and that question has basically is setting the what you call premises or the background for this talk. So she has been asked that what she considered to be the first sign of civilization in culture, and the student expected Mead to talk about the fish hooks, clay pots, or the grinding stones, but no. Mead said the first sign of civilization in an ancient culture was a femur bone that had been broken and then healed. And Mead goes on and explained that, and she explained that in the animal kingdom, if you break your leg, you die. You cannot run from danger. You cannot get to river for drink or hunt for food. You are a meat for the prowling beast. No animal survives a broken leg long enough to be the bone to heal. A broken femur that has healed is the evidence that someone has taken time to stay with one who fell, who has bound up the wind, has carried the person to the safety, and has tended the person to through the recovery. Helping someone else through difficulty is the where civilization starts. Caregiving of the society. Our society, the caregiving nature is itself she considered as the beginning of civilization, and the caregiving is what this whole tribal healing culture is based on. And the very basic premises are. I would rather say that in all medical tradition, the very purpose of the tradition is to heal someone, whether it's a psychological or the physical pain or some. The goal is to heal the someone and get back to the normal life context. Whatever the definition of normal that discipline believes in. That's not the point of debate. But the question here is that the goal is same. And the caregiving is throughout all the healing traditions, throughout the evolution of medical tradition. So being an archaeologist, I would like to give an historical perspective of how we have a long evolutionary history of medical tradition. So we have our medical tradition history goes back to the prehistoric times. Kiran Hardy from the University of Barcelona, Spain, she has largely worked on this Paleolithic and Mesolithic healing tradition, medical tradition in that sense, what kind of medicine people were using, what was the healing mechanism during that time. And in India itself, we have lots of evidence, archaeological evidence, where we have, for example, we have evidence for the trafinations from Burjahom, Kashmir. We have evidence of dental surgery from or the dental treatment from the Mehergarh, Pakistan. So we have from our prehistoric times, we have a very, very long and rich history and tradition or evidence for the healing traditions or the method of curing people in that sense from the disease or the illnesses. Then I'll go quickly to this Vedic and post-Vedic era, what people might consider it to call as early historic, early historic, later historic period, whatever the time frame or the nomenclature they put. So, but in this tradition, we have a very nice thing that we have a documented knowledge system. There in the prehistoric system, we have only evidence. We don't have the what you call anything to base our argument until with the just other than the evidence and the further study on the based on that evidence. But we don't have any written document to support our claim, or there is no people alive who can come and verify that what I am saying is correct or wrong in that sense. So our medical tradition goes back to the Vedic system. I put here Atharveda, but even the Rig Vedic tradition, the Rig Vedic tradition, the Atharvans and they are sometimes categorized as called as a healer. But of course, in Atharveda is basically a magico. People consider, or it's generally considered as a magico-medicinal textbook. But I have a slightly different opinion for Atharveda because when I was reading this Sangita, I find that it has a very unique way of encoding knowledge system. Though I don't disagree that it has medico-medicinal element there, but there are many suktas in this Atharveda. For example, if I get Kshetriya Rog or Nasak Sukta or the Rohini Banaspati Sukta, like this many suktas, if we'll go. So they have uniquely documented the knowledge system. The mantras for me, it's kind of encryption method, where they have sometimes, because many times they don't disclose the name of the plant or don't disclose the name of the materials they are using for the healing or the medical purposes, but they give a nice context, like where you can find the knowledge system, what are the qualities of the plant or the material they are saying, where I can find those, and what is the use. So basically, it's this nice way of encoding. And then we have, of course, Buddhist medicine system, and then Jainism and all this. So we have a very, very rich and diverse medical system, which later contributed to give what we celebrate now as codified medical system, starting from the Ayurveda or yoga or naturopathy, Unani and Siddha. Of course, Unani has a foreign origin, but yeah, Siddha, Tibetan, or homeopathy. This all has their history, goes back to this ancient tradition. From there, they have developed. For example, if I have not discussed all this, I've just put example of Ayurveda because it's among all these people are more aware of this Ayurveda in that sense. It's more popular. So Ayurveda is considered as Upanga of Atharveda. So Sruta considers it Upanga of Atharveda, and one of the Upanga, 8 Upangas of Atharveda talks about this Bhut Vidya. Ayurveda talks about Bhut Vidya, which loosely can be translated as psychiatry or demonology practices in that sense. So in this people talks about this Devi Vipasya Chikitsa, where use of medicinal mantras are there, magic are there. So in that sense, we have evidence even in the codified medical system, which Atharveda and our other Indic tradition, which has carried forwarded in that sense. And then let's talk about Ayurveda itself. The development of Ayurveda itself is very exciting and it's very nice. If you feel close, if there are many Ayurvedic physicians and experts here, I am not an Ayurvedic physician, so forgive me if I'll make any wrong claim in that sense. But yeah, from my limited understanding and reading, so Ayurveda has its root in different traditions and the philosophical tradition. For example, from the Ayurveda, its element is from the Buddhism and Jainism. It has its basis in the Sankhya, Vaisesika, and Nyaya philosophy. That Yukti Dipasya Chikitsa comes in that sense from the Nyaya philosophy. And then Charaka himself acknowledged the contribution he has got from the Banicharas and Gocharas, basically the forest dwellers and the cow herders from the forest, for the development of this knowledge tradition, the identification of plant, or using the indigenous system for the medicine. They have their history is very, very long back in that sense, though somehow it got exiled for some timing, which I'll talk later of the process behind that or why this has happened. in much shorter way. But yeah, this gives an overview in that sense. So and this knowledge system is now classified as a non-codified knowledge system because their practice. Interesting to mention here that the tribal I am working on, they don't speak the local Malayalam language. So this was the what you call background for my talk in that sense, which I would like to present here. Then I'll go back to my research, which I'm going to talk, and that's called this indigenous healing tradition or the local healing tradition or a tribal healing, whatever name is preferable for the community or the group. It's have been called from the various names. But again, the one more slightly debated and contested point here is that the definition of indigenous itself. Who is an indigenous? Whether can we call ourselves as indigenous because we born onto some land? Are we indigenous to that land? So that debate is important. But here, since I'm focusing on the other part of the medical tradition of that indigenous knowledge, so I'll be not going much more detail of that debate. But yeah, if somebody is interested in discussion, we can elaborate on that part. So I'll just jump to this indigenous knowledge. What is indigenous knowledge? Like indigenous community, indigenous knowledge is all very, it's like vast in that sense and very hard to summarize indigenous knowledge or into one definition. So what I have tried to do summarize the definition, various definition through some points which are as follows in that sense. It is an intergenerational passed on understanding and skill, which is verified by their elders, conveyed and guided by their experience, and developed by the particular community in a specific geospatial location in that sense. And it's many times it's empirical and revealed to them. It's very personal in that sense. It's experience based. It's holistic in nature. Many times people can have a different argument on that whether it's holistic or not. That's a different debate altogether itself, and it's transmitted orally. And the most interesting part, which makes indigenous knowledge is much more interesting and a point to discuss here is that its determinants are not only mind, body, spirit, ecology, socio-cultural practice, because this knowledge system goes out of the body. In that sense, this includes the society, this ecology, atmosphere outside. It's also included in the knowledge system itself. Spirits, extraterrestrial spirits, like which we sometimes as we do not acknowledge in the physicalist and materialist model, but they all include this into the worldview and knowledge system. So just to give an overview of what their worldviews is, how they operate with this worldview. So indigenous people have three interacting world. It's called physical world, sacred world, and the human world. The physical world basically deals with the physical substances, land, sky, and all this. The sacred world deals with the metaphysical and spiritual, like spiritual agents, like spirits, gods, and all these things, and human knowledge, of course. So these are intertwined to each other, and which forms their indigenous worldview. And from that worldview, people operate and people go further and discuss their cultural system, practice their cultural system, practice their belief in that sense. So just I would like to just elaborate a little point on that. I was reading some time back this Charles Laughlin biogenetic structuralism, and he has nicely classified the worldviews in that sense. So he classified this, categorized this polyphagic and monophagic culture. So basically, he says that the polyphagic culture basically gives importance to this this knowledge system, which is in that sense revealed in the ultra consciousness state, like ecstasy or in the dream state, whereas the monophagic culture gives only importance to this physical world, like since the dream is not physical, so it's not real in that sense. So it took this indigenous worldview to another course of discovery, which is real and non-real, the reality and non-reality. But since he has categorized this polyphagic culture, so I found it very interesting because the polyphagic culture is what indigenous worldview practices. Their culture, because they give importance to this knowledge system, which sometimes they got in the dream system. Because when I was talking to the indigenous healer, they saw that many times they got knowledge of the plant or the healing system in their dreams, or when were they in their position, when we are in the possessed, the god comes and tells him. So all these things makes this knowledge system interesting for further research in that sense. Which of course the physicalist and materialist model does not accept, and as a knowledge system. So here is the basically to give an overview that how this knowledge system is different from the what we claim as the scientific knowledge system. Here, indigenous knowledge system is basically non-dualistic understanding of world. There is no human nature dualism. So all are interconnected, intertwined in that sense. And then sometimes non-linguistic communication is very, very important in that sense, because sometimes we got revealed to the knowledge, sometimes we got this dream in that sense, and we cannot communicate that because their knowledge is more in this tacit form of knowledge. It's not very which we can verbally or in communication where we can explain in that sense. It's very subjective. It's a mixture of tradition and present intervention in that sense. Whereas the scientific knowledge system is in a analytical, reductionist approach, they approach in that sense, materialistic approach have there. So just to give an overview to just to contextualize my debate, like talk, which I'm going to now present here, so as a case study. So basically, I was giving an overview what those community are, which I have chosen for the tribal for my research here. So this community are basically named as Arnadan community, Chola Naikan community, Katupanyan community, and Khatu Naikan community. These community are family level foragers and hunters in their practices, and traditionally they were nomadic in their practices, but due to certain policies which government has implemented, the forest regulation they have implemented, and there are many support system and schemes which government has implemented in the tribal colonies, and which has encouraged or we sometimes force also the tribal communities to abandon their traditional practices and settle in choose the sedentary life and settle in the colonies nearby the cities, or come out of the forest and isolated area. But many of the communities, for example, Chola Naikan community here on the right top corner, many of the community are still living in the natural rock caves. And they are hunter-gatherer, completely hunter-gatherer, living in the natural rock-cut caves of Nilambur Valley and Western Ghats in that sense. And their knowledge system, their practice of healing is very, very interesting and unique in that sense. So I think it's worth to look on their healing tradition, their worldviews, because their life is itself so exciting in that sense, and so vulnerable at the same time. Just to give an overview of how their life is vulnerable as well as exciting. So just see, I have identified some of the possible vulnerability condition which they might are exposed to, or they might expose to this condition. So I have identified 6 situations for which they are exposed to get a disease or get sick in that sense. The number one is the seasonal change and the temperature variation. When I was doing my field work, many of the community members from all the across 4 communities have said that the seasonal change is one of the major reasons they get sick. They are frequently occurring diseases like fever, cough, and cold are due to the seasonal change. Then comes the natural hazard. The natural hazard is also is one of the important situation which expose them to this disease and illnesses. And then another, the diet change. Diet change it is very recent phenomena, since because the government has implemented restrictions to the forest and forest product to collect and hunting. Because earlier their food habits are mostly based on the hunting and gathering, which includes the animals, including monkey to leopard to python to all, and to the tubers and fibers getting from the fruits, getting from the forest. But since they have the forest regulations forbid them to go for the hunting and do many of the practices they traditionally follow for their food habits, which has led to this only whether they have to rely on the public distribution systems which government provides, the rice and other things. And then this has drastically changed their food habits, and which has a larger significant effect, adverse effect on the health of their community, which I'll address in a little bit later in the subsequent slide. And then their subsistence practice itself, because their practice expose them to many times to the animal and insects and parasites, which they might get diseases, and sometimes their food habits when they used to contaminated food, or taking a contaminated prey to the home after having. And then this, and sometimes what happens, they get snake bites or other insects bites when during their fields, for the collection of the forest products, which led them to this genetic disease situation where they can get disease either from the snake or the dogs or other animal bites in that sense. Then accidents and injuries, which are also very, very common phenomena, because when they climb to the forest, a tree, many times they fall. Many of the case study which I was doing, I have seen that almost every adult has once in a lifetime has fall from the tree or got injured during the field work, when they were in the field for collecting the medicinal plants or whatever the traditional practices they are doing. So this also make them prone to get disease or the sick in that sense. And then there comes the supernatural conditions. Since their worldview has the sacred world in that, so sometimes they associate their disease to this gods, spirits, and the fellow members, and who is capable to do harm to the community through black magic and all. And the last but not least, this psychological factor. Sometimes they undergone through a very traumatic situation. For example, shifting from their original land habit, when they are forced to shift to other settled colony. This has a very adverse negative effect on their psychological health in that sense. So all these situations make this community very, very vulnerable to disease. But then the question comes, what they do when they got this sick? How do they manage their health? What do they do when they are ill? What kind of medical practices they follow to heal themselves? What are the techniques of appropriate therapies among themselves, which keep them safe from this disease or help them to cure the disease in that sense? So to discuss all this part, first we have to discuss what is their health. What do they mean by health? What do they mean by healing in that sense? Because getting this is very much important for me, because to understand the philosophy behind there now, because until unless we will know that what is they do mean by health, what is their indicators for health, it's very hard to define that what will be their healing practices. So when I was doing my research, I found that their definition of health, their model of health is still very, very different from what we call the bioaesthetical notion of health, where you can measure the health in terms of through the technology and other stuffs. There, it's not something which is statical in that sense. Their health has basically three major components or three major indicators. The first one is productivity. You are productive in that sense. For example, a old man is healthy until unless he go for the forest to collect food along with the other fellow members. If he stop going for the forest for collecting foods, means there is something health issue is that which is not making him to go to the forest, and since is not healthy in their definition. The second component is that the expected functioning abilities. So here it's what the bioaesthetical notion of health says, that the health have a normal functioning abilities, but here their normal is not normal, because normal can be different for different people. If you set a goal for very different, you can have a different normal definition in that sense. So their definition, which I found is very interesting, is the expected functioning abilities. The child is expected to behave in a certain way. A pregnant lady is expected to behave in a certain way. But in a bioaesthetical notion, if a lady is pregnant and she is not doing normal activity, so she is not healthy. But in her in this indigenous STC's model of health, it's not like that, because a certain pregnant lady is supposed to function in a certain way. So in that sense, and she's productive, because her productivity is toward the larger goal of society, that is the progeny, to produce children in that sense. So in that sense, so it's very interesting. And the third component is that causal contribution to the larger goal of society. How much you are not the vital goal, the individual goal, but the larger goal of the society. For social level, because they are family level foragers, and they have very strong network among themselves. In that sense, though sometimes they are flexible when there is a surplus of food and all, but when there is shortage of food, their network become very, very strong, and the sharing is very nice in that sense to take care of each others. And the other interesting thing in that sense, so these are the three: productivity, expected functioning abilities, and the causal contribution to the larger goal of society. And the more interesting was that when I was looking at the healthcare system, what is the structure of healthcare system, I found that there is no professional healer as such. Like, for example, biomedicine, we have a doctor, which is an individual person, which is professional in that sense. But there is no professional in that sense. Even there is no Vaidyas among those community, the four community I have been studying on, there is no Vaidyas. Though there are professional healer in other community, but the community I am working on, there is no professional healer. The knowledge of medical system is in the cultural cloud. It's a collective knowledge. Because and the collective knowledge is guided by the experience from the elders, and as well as their everyday day-to-day encounter in the field in that sense. And they develop, and the knowledge system they pass on, it's both from the horizontal, from the parents, grandfather to father to child, to this horizontal, learning from each other. So this, in that sense, their knowledge system is very, very unique. And the health has its affair, if you say. So it is different from this Western allopathic medicine, where health is a very private, in that sense, we have a doctor-patient confidentiality, and in that sense, but here is health is a very much public affair, because when you get ill, so you first you contact immediate family members, then you contact neighbor, and then if you not get cured, then you contact this community member itself. They all come together, they do their best, and they try to heal the person in that sense. So here it's the healing system is much more public in that sense, not the private. So this makes this difference from this other medical healing tradition which we celebrate or which we practice largely here. And then comes to this diagnosis and etiology. How do they diagnose the health? What is their theory? What do associate the cause of the disease? So I was talking about the diagnosis system. So their diagnosis system includes the physical method to diagnosis, like touch, the diagnosis through the sensual perceptions like looking, smelling, and all those things. And then there are other, the method is for diagnosis is through mantras in the dream, or basically using of ecstasy, ultra consciousness state in that sense. And here I would like to again elaborate a bit on that, the diagnosis method, because based on this diagnosis method, sometimes this knowledge system has been criticized also, because here they gives importance to this spirits, dreams, and all. But since we have a very diverse intellectual tradition, philosophical tradition, and one of the philosophical traditions, I think, if I'm not wrong, the NIAS, it talks about the yogic perspective, this yogic perception as a knowledge, as it is proof of knowledge system. And in that yogic perception, there is the revelations or the of knowledge system is also considered as a valid source of knowledge. So here, in that sense, if I may use this philosophical school to interpret this their method of diagnosis. So it's very much for me, it's very much in that sense going with this NIAS philosophy tradition, where they give importance to this mantras as a source of knowledge system to diagnosis what is wrong with the person who is sick or ill in that sense. And there comes the collective experience, when the people as a public affair come together and then try to find out the region in that sense. And then they associate, since their worldview is interacting with the three world, like human world, physical world, and the sacred world. So the causes of disease also associated with these three worlds. They for a normally or frequently occurring disease, they sometimes associate the knowledge with the natural cause, like heat, cold, temperature variation, and etc. etc. Then they also associate the knowledge system that etiology, cause of disease, to the supernatural things. For example, they associate that when they don't do the ritual on time, they get sick. They don't offer the ancestors their share of what you call revelation or puja, so sometimes they get sick. And then the third is that the outsider. Because when I was discussing among the community members, I found that they are very skeptic with the outsider in that sense, because they consider many times that many disease the outsider has brought to the community, which was not earlier experienced by those community members. It doesn't mean that outsider from the city or a market, but the other community. For example, a Khatun community might see a Panyan community or the Arnadan community as an outsider, and they can also cause the disease to this community. When they decide that what is the reason for the disease, then they go for the decision-making process, that what kind of remedies they will use to cure that or to heal that sense. And in that sense, their knowledge system and that healing knowledge system varied from the non-medicine or knowledge of medicine, like from plants to animals to this minerals to a special sets of skill like massage and bone settling and all these things, and to the of course the mantras and magical medicinal practice are very integral part of the rituals, are very integral part of the healing traditions in that sense. So once they decide the cause of disease, then they decide which kind of remedies are there. But it doesn't mean that one time at one, like for example, if somebody decided that natural, it's called a natural cause, so only they will just go for the natural kind of remedies. They all along with they integrate the healing practices. They will use the plant, but at the same time they will use mantras or the other ritual practices also, because for them the plant itself is not just a plant, because they treat plant as the part of their worldview. And because they have a very certain specific time up to collect plant, very specific tools to collect plant, because they cannot just go anytime and collect the medicinal plants and all. But what was interesting when I was doing the research, I found that they are not very much aware of, or they don't bother to name those plants which they use for the healing. For example, healing here in that sense. So what they do for, I asked the one question many times, because I asked this, can you name the plant which you use for this kind of disease? For example, headache, can you name the plant which you use for the cough? So they told, I don't know the name of plant. Then I said that if I'll bring you the plant, can you tell me that which plant is used for what purposes? They told, no, I can't, because for them, knowledge is very much contextual. They will only able to identify the knowledge, that plant, which plant is used for, when in the very context, where it grows, whether it's near river, which trees near its growth, which color is there, which shape is there. And that fascinated me to know that how their knowledge system is very much what you call contextual and ecologically storage. They don't keep their medicinal plant in advance and then for the future. When they require the medicinal plant, they will go to the forest, they collect the process, and then they do the healing part, or they take the medicine for themselves or the other community member. In that sense, so the storage system was also very much interesting, and that makes their knowledge system so sustainable in that sense, because there is no, in that sense, what you call this plundering of those plants from the forest and selling it for the benefits. In that sense, which was very, very fascinating for me, their knowledge network and the system which they follow and they hand over to the next generation in that sense. So for them, nomenclature was not much what you call a point for consideration, because their purpose is fulfilled, and their purpose is fulfilled because they have a vast field experience and everyday encounter with those plants when they go for the forest collections in that sense. So this is to just give an overview how complex and their knowledge system is, and how inter-community exchange is happening for the knowledge in that sense. So here on the right hand side top corner, there are 4 communities: Chola Naikans, Katu Naikans, Arnadan, and Panyan. And these are the 168 medicinal plants which I have identified during my fieldwork, which they are frequently using for the 52 diseases in that sense. And then see the inter-community network, the social network among themselves, sharing the knowledge system, because many of them are edible, many of them are not edible. So they are very much aware of this, which plant is edible, which plant is not edible, which plant they can eat, which plant they can't eat in that sense. So, and then this is just to give an overview that what kind of knowledge system, what kind of medicinal plant they mostly prefer, and they have the vast knowledge. The graph shows that here the disease which is frequently occurring, the knowledge system for the plant for those diseases, they have many plants to cure that disease, because sometimes what happens, they didn't get one plant, they will go for another option. So here for Humanities in science, they have 50 plants to cure or to use for this problem in that sense. Whereas for the itching, they have one, because they don't bother for this what you call this bodily license in that sense, or the itching problem, because that in their health model, that is not creating an obstruction in their productivity, neither it's creating any functional disabilities in that sense, nor it is obstructing this contributing to the larger work society. So the itching for them is not a much deal, because in that sense it's not affecting their health definition itself. For example, I have just put here, and then their medical tradition use the animal byproducts very extensively. For example, here, if you see the network here, the elephant is basically used for the tooth pain for the child, and then the younger generation also is used by all the 4 communities: Arnadan, here Chola Naikan, Katu Naikan, and Katu Panyan. So this social network basically gives an idea that how they it's not like that they have their own medicinal plant for particular community also, but there are very much commonality in the use of their medicinal plant. But one more thing is important, or the medical substance they use for the curing the disease in that sense. But one more thing is important here: many of the plants they use in that sense, they claim that this is not used by the Ayurvedic traditions. In that sense, I have to cross-check and verify with the Ayurvedic specialist in that sense, which I have not done. I am doing a process only. But yeah, they claim that because these people are also involved in collecting the medicinal plants for the Ayurvedic community, and Ayurvedic doctors for the Kotikal Ayurveda Sala from the Kerala and all. So many times they say that they have their own secret medicinal plants, which many of them I have tried to document in that sense, but many of them they didn't reveal. in that sense. They told this it's their knowledge system, and they don't want to share the knowledge system with others, because that gives an insecurity, and because they protect the knowledge system as well as they want to claim the knowledge system. The ownership of the knowledge system is very important for them in that sense. So that was also an interesting factor during when observation, when I was doing my research among those community. And the last but not the least, this magical healing through the magical means, like the ritual practices and all. I have just put one example from the Katupanyan community, for example. So all these systems, so this makes their knowledge system it's much more complex, and there is a need to, we have to look much more in depth to knowledge system, to understand those knowledge system and discuss the knowledge system in a much larger scale in that sense. But what happens now, why this knowledge system, what I'm trying to find out, what I'm trying to address those here in this slide is that why this knowledge system has been in that sense exile for a very long time in that sense, once, which has contributed to development of Ayurveda and such kind of this knowledge system of, but what we see that after industrial evolution, basically there has been a shift in epistemological point of view, where the people have started considering knowledge that is carries attributes of inconvertibility, that is, which knowledge is objective, which is rational, which is replicable, which is verifiable. Only that knowledge is verifiable, is valid knowledge in that sense. So in that sense, they say that whether not only the knowledge, but the method of knowledge discovery is also very much important, and it must contain the explanation, and that makes this knowledge system, the indigenous knowledge system, this framework, exclude the indigenous knowledge system, because here we give much importance to the subjectivity, individual experience, individual knowledge in that sense, because many times the dream cannot be shared by others in that sense, or the revelation which somebody got in the position or the trance state, it cannot be shared with somebody else. So it's very hard to either to codify those knowledge system and share this knowledge system with others. So because of this in the knowledge system, so they don't consider it as a valid knowledge system. And this was the major reason which scientific knowledge system has objected this knowledge, indigenous knowledge system in the category of knowledge itself, because they say that the knowledge is only acquired through the physical sense, acknowledged through the virtual experience, and valid and objective obtained as a result of practice of methods. Well, method is very much important in that sense, but which does not imply the belief in that sense. Though here is also a methodology they follow, but their methodology is not complying with the scientific objections what they are trying to say, because they use ecstasy, knowledge, and the belief in spirits and all. So this has posed a what you call objection. But what I am trying to say here is that the knowledge system, which is much more diverse and need not to be explained from the only one framework. It has to be explained from their own perspectives, their own worldviews, their own or the other existing models, because we have a much more diverse what you call the method for to claim that which is a knowledge, which is not starting from the Jainism to the Buddhism to the Sankhya Yoga, darshan everywhere. So they have their own source of in that sense. So why can't we appreciate the indigenous knowledge like their system source also, which they claim to them, and then we look into that, we do more research and then come to any conclusion, because without doing the research, more and in-depth research, it's very hard to make an axioms based on that we can conclude anything in that sense. So the very purpose of the talk here is to just to give an overview that how diverse and how rich their knowledge traditions is, which is developed for a very, very, very long time, and it's now been practiced, it's still been practiced by the community, which are much more deep inside the forest. They don't have exposure to those doctors, and then they don't have a special vaidyas in their sense. So that's why I choose to put the title itself as there is no doctor, because since in the community there is no healer, there is no doctor, particular individual as a doctor. The knowledge itself is a community knowledge. So why can't we say we discuss, we do more research, and then come to a conclusion if possible. Otherwise, we keep doing on the research on that sense. But the problem here that in the last few decades, though the people have started doing research on the indigenous heritage traditions, but one thing which I, from a limited understanding, which I understood, there are few what you call drawbacks which I found, or the setbacks, that much of the researchers, they try to claim the knowledge system as a heritage and try to put them in the museum. Because they try to protect those knowledge system in such a way that it should not come out. In that sense, it should be a part of museum. It's a heritage and celebrate the heritage. But they are not doing much to develop the knowledge system, to make this knowledge system outreach to this much more larger community, And this problem of museumization, putting the knowledge in the self, making as a heritage, is what is problematic, and it need to be addressed. And here comes the job of our like academicians and the people who are working in those areas, because they have to find an innovative way to how can we at the same time we protect their culture, their beliefs, their practices. We don't want to corrupt their knowledge system by making any other, or not even, I would not say corrupt, but not try to influence the knowledge system, but to use that knowledge system and develop a kind of mutual understanding how to bring the knowledge system to a larger audience, and then get people might get advantage from this knowledge system, and it can open a large area of research also in that sense. So this is what, so my way of forward is to have to stop museumization of the knowledge system, making it a heritage and protecting it in that sense. But we have to integrate knowledge system with the other existing knowledge system and make this knowledge system publicly available. At the same time, protecting their rights, their intellectual rights, all kinds of right. But we have to make, we have to come up with an innovative way to address these problems. So this is what I have to say for today. Thank you so much for patiently listening me. I hope I made some sense.
I was just saying thanks for that, and appreciating the way you've systematized your understanding of their perceptions of their health and the kind of situations that you have spread out, and then the healing practices and so on. I think that was very clearly done and presented.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
I would have a question or two to just place, from what you've said at the end about, one, the fact of legitimizing and understanding this as a legitimate form of knowledge, to the problem of museumization and therefore seeing it as something which is solidified and history rather than something which is lived today and maybe getting adapted and innovated as they live through their lives now, and that it's collective knowledge. There isn't a healer. I found that very interesting, in contrast to the problem that we as health systems persons today also see, the over-dependence of the likes of us on the doctor and the medical system, and a complete, therefore, the kind of power that we have given to the dominant system. And therefore, then it's over-medicalization, etc., etc. This is a complete contrast to that. And thereby, what is it that, how do we, among the learnings, one is, as you pointed out, the kind of, very specific plants that they would use for some particular problem and so on, which is one kind of knowledge gain that can be made by sharing. But I think much more important may be for us to understand how they acquire that knowledge. It's not being done in the lab, but if we are assuming that what they are using as plants is effective, right, that they have over the years been using it because it has its effectiveness, then how is it that they discover that process and that contextual knowledge? How does it develop and emerge? Is something which we need to relearn so that we can, get that, the kind of questions that the women's movement and the environment movement, for example, is raising, of how do we get the power back from the professional doctor and so on, will come with an understanding of that, would be another contribution that your kind of research and delving deeper into this can make. So I think with that, I'll open it up to others for questions and clarifications that they may have.
Yes. Before we start, I would like Dr. Thakur and Madhulika ma'am and Sujata ma'am to also respond, especially Dr. Thakur, because he's always encouraging young minds like me and Rakesh to present our ideas and work and proposal. So, sir, it would be glad if we could hear you for the first talk of the year. Followed if Madhulika ma'am and Sujata ma'am, please also, that would be very nice if you could respond, as well as Ajay sir, who has also been very active. So then we can take the rounds of questions. There are one on the comment section. And Abhay sir, if you want to start with the question answer round.
Johar everyone. Sorry, it's not a question, probably a suggestion. because then congratulations, Rakesh, for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you, sir.
But regarding when you said, like the people did not tell you the name of the plants, it was actually deliberate. According to my experience, it may be a personal one. It's not that they don't know the name of the plant. Professor Manendra has his roots even in Jharkhand, because undivided Bihar. He understood there was a place called Hatting Hode, and that place was very popularly known for the tribal medicine. He was a very popular man, and one point of time in the 90s and end of the 20th century, he was a very, very popular man. And later, carrying on his tradition, there is a conglomeration of medicine man. They have made a union kind of thing, and they call this as hodopathy. Okay, so now when they are not telling you the name of the plants or hiding you something, this is just because they don't want their intellectual property to be stolen by some multinational companies. I have already spoken to many of them prior to this decade. Professor Manindra would also agree. There is a millet which we in locally call it madua, and that is very good for hemoglobin. And so now it is very much in vogue. And there are other that baying saag, that very popular. It's a very rich in medicine and for jaundice and other treatment. So now it is actually being commercialized to such extent that it is not available even for the locals to consume, for the local consumption also. This is one thing. So basically, I think you may again put an effort to explore more regarding the taxonomy or nomenclature of the plants. This may add on to your research. Second is, even the United Nations is opening up. It proposed a university to be opened up, United Nations University on Center on Traditional Knowledge in 2004. It is still in progress. But then again, a Traditional Knowledge Institute was established at Charles Darwin University in Australia. And they have taken up traditional knowledge revival pathways, working with the Aborigines. I think you could just Google it, or if you wish, I can share you some papers and you can go through this, how they are trying to document and working on it. Yeah, thank you.
Definitely, sir. If I may take 1 minute just to address what sir raised the first concern. Sir, what you said is very, very correct. I'm not denying that fact, but my experience is slightly different with this community, because when I was doing my field work, many times when I was going with them in the field, so many times they showed the medicine. This is a medicinal plant I use. It's look like a snake. For a snake medicine, it's like a snake. They have a fun like a snake in that sense, but I don't know the name of the medicinal plant. So they don't hesitate to show me the medicinal plant, but they don't know the name because nomenclature was not in the but it's not like it's for all the medicine. They know the name of many medicine which they have shared with me. And but many medicines they also don't know the name, because they know, I mean, they cannot even know the name. They can't even identify those medicinal plants in isolation itself. If I bring them to them, for them it's very hard to identify that this medicinal plant is used for what. So they are so tuned to this nature, they will only identify in the context when they say where is they are near this tree or that tree, and then based on their physical feature of the plant, like its color, texture and everything, they will be able to say that. So yeah, many times they purposefully don't say the names. They don't try to but many times they don't know the names also, because the practice of naming the plant was not there in the practice itself in their community. So yes, I agree with you, but my experience was slightly different from it might be from your experience in that sense. So this is what I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Rakesh. Just 30 seconds more. Sorry, because recently there was an initiative by the government of India, and they sent a couple of IAS officers down to Ranchi, and the senior IAS Kekeson got in touch with me, and he asked me that since Abhay, you are working among tribal belts and you're doing field studies, can you get hold of some medicine man, or and then when I tried to get hold of the people, and that there is some initiative by the government, they bluntly said nahi. मतलब उस union जो hodopathic union, they said कि we will not initiate any kind of dialogues. They have a kind of own charter and own principles, and they said कि we are not sharing it with anything. And Vasvi Kido, I hope Manin sir might be knowing her. Vasvi Kido, she actually heads it, and she is a social activist but heading the medicine man that conglomeration. Okay, thank you, Rakesh. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your comments, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I forgot to address you. Sorry.
That's perfect.
We have a question in the comment section by Diksha Singh. And it's okay if you want to ask your question in Hindi or English, though it's completely okay. You can do that. So Diksha, would you like to ask your question?
Good evening, everybody. Ma'am, I would like to ask that as I was talking about the indigenous knowledge system, ma'am, majority of these are orally transmitted through the generations. So, how do we document these for the later generations to come?
Shared. It is by Mr. Anil Kumar Vadiraju. I'll just say that also so you can respond to that, Rakesh. He says it can only go this far and not beyond. I contest this way of critiquing modernity. It is positively harmful to ordinary people, even as you may decry that modern medical knowledge is too commercialized. That the modern medical knowledge is too commercialized is to say one thing. To say that modern medical knowledge itself is redundant is quite another. I differ with this running after the fads of postmodernism. It is another form of populism, and I'm not saying this for the first time, nor will it be for the last time. So it will be interesting if you could respond to this also.
Definitely, I'll respond. Definitely, I'll respond that. I'd love to respond that. Do you have any other questions? Otherwise,
So,
Hello,
yes.
am I
Yes,
audible?
yes, yes. You're audible.
Yes, Johar, good evening everyone. My name is Abhishek and I am student of Dr. Abhay sir from Ranchi itself. My question is basically from Rakesh sir, you,
Yeah.
that as you have, your presentation was definitely an appreciable one. But I just like to add on some of the things like, have you, like as Ritu ma'am said, that the process, the actual process of getting a particular plant for a particular disease is a very complex thing. Okay, so what do they do when they have certainly genetically disease, you know, when certain diseases come from genetics itself? So may I ask you this thing, that have you done a you know, a part of your process to take that answer of genetically disease? Please elaborate this, Rakesh sir.
Definitely, I'd love to elaborate that.
Yeah, please elaborate. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Abhishek.
thank you, Ritika. Thank you, Ritu ma'am. Thank you, Priyanka ma'am.
And Mamta, you had a question. You had raised your hand. You may ask, please.
No, ma'am.
Okay. So for the timing, I'll respond to this question so that it not get cluttered altogether. So I'll start with the very first question which has been asked for the how to document the knowledge system. This documenting the knowledge system is very much complex as well as it's tricky also, because you have to take care of how we document this knowledge system that should not be a threat to their intellectual right. There's not be a threat to their cultural system, their cultural belief system, because the problem is the moment we started talking about their belief system and culture system, and we get criticism, which you have heard the criticism, which we get just even to talk in that sense. To further, for example, making a platform to document those knowledge system it needs a different kind of mindset. So and because here we are like so much biased in that sense, so we don't take even to liberty to discuss itself. We are so closed in our in system, so we don't want to discuss. So in that sense, documentation can be happen with use of technology, first of all, through the video, audio recording, photography, and all these things. And then first of all, do they want to document those knowledge system? Because it's their intellectual right whether they want to document the knowledge system or not. First, we have to ask this question: how do they want to document? Whether they want to take this knowledge system to this larger community, or they want to keep this knowledge system within themselves, or they want to document this knowledge system for their future generation, not for the outsiders. So first, we have to identify these questions: okay, whether they want to document or not, and on what level they want to document the knowledge system. And then there comes the methodology part. How do we document the knowledge system? So first we have to find out this whether they want to document knowledge system, and then we can use much more innovative kind of use technology, use other old method of documenting, because the knowledge system is based on Shrutis and Smriti documentation, which is already a form of documentation in our intellectual tradition. So because our Vedas are like Shruti and Smriti tradition, which they have keep on compiling those in the form of Shrutis and Smritis, and then later compiled in the textual form. So in that sense, it is very different kind of framework we need to. First we have to identify that what is their intention behind that, and then we agree on the method part in that sense. So this is my what you call response to the first, and the response to the second, this critique part. First of all, I will say that if I wish if he would have attended the talk, he would have never felt this way in that sense, because throughout the talk I have never ever mentioned any time that this knowledge system is great, that knowledge system is not great, this knowledge system is valid, that knowledge system is not valid in that sense. So I wish if you could have attended, then you don't have asked this criticism in that sense. But I would love to say that, because see what happens, we have assumptions, we make assumptions. And what basis we ask the question, everybody has their own biasness because they have their own understanding to or the way subjectivity to approach the things. And based on that approach, we address the problem in that sense. So in that sense, the traditional knowledge system, I am talking, it's not talking for this, I am criticizing the modernity, because modernity is inevitable. I am a student of archaeology and history, and archaeology teaches us there is nothing permanent. We have evolved throughout starting from the biology to culture to technology, we have evolution throughout the ages. And every time for the older generation, the new generation is a modern generation, and it's kind of modernity to them in that sense, because we have in the course of development course. So modern, so there's no question of I am criticizing the modernity or glorifying the traditional knowledge system. So I wish if we could have attended the talk, we could have more discussion, much more healthier discussion here. Here I feel like I'm just addressing the problem which is not existing in the current format and the physical form. So rather I'll not elaborate on that. If you want, I can have, I have shared my email ID, we can discuss more on that. And the next question I asked is, how can I address their genetic disease and all? You are very right. These questions are very, very critical, and it needs a different kind of understanding to deal with these questions. But again, as I earlier mentioned, that these all are biomedicinal terminology. Whether genetic disease you call it, the chronic disease you call it, degenerative disease we call it, their classification have this? Do their model of health model have this kind of classification? How do they classify this knowledge system? Because, for example, I just give for skin diseases. For us, it's a serious problem. We have a whole setup of department dermatologists, like in that sense, the Western medicine has a department for dermatologists to see the skin-related disease. But for them, skin-related disease is not is a serious disease in their model, because in their health definition, it's not causing much threat or obstructing much more in that sense. So their disease classification, first we have to understand, do their disease classification have genetic disorder in that sense, and how do they consider it? I have personally not looked in the particularly genetic disorder, because my goal was slightly different from to go for the individual disease and in that sense. But to address this kind of question, first we have to understand their model itself, because every model is unique in their way, and they have their own system to operate in the model. So we have to understand their model, their health disease classification model, and then we come that what do they, where they got this kind of similar kind of experience, how do they address those kind of problems? So this comes later. I hope I have answered right way, because in that sense, this is what I can explain, because this is not my expertise area and I'm not doing on that research, so I cannot be much help in that sense. But by the way, thank you so much for asking these questions.
Look, Skandesh is here, I think so, and he put something in the chat. Can we maybe pick that up?
Yes. Should you want me to read it, Rakesh?
It will be good for if you can read audience in that sense.
Okay. So if it will be good, agar aap hi puche, if you ask, it's more interactive and up. So go ahead.
Sorry, actually I have missed in between because I'm outside and I'm in my clinic. So sorry for that. But I was there in the beginning, and it was so great to observe the presentation and some of the thoughts that has been raised. So my perspective of this, even I'm not sure whether it was dealt here or not, but since in the midst of this pandemic, we are also observing a great extent of medicalization, where communities are losing, individuals are losing their way of sustaining life or sustaining health. In terms of building up the knowledge. So we have a model where the hierarchy of knowledge has been built. There is no cross sharing of knowledge. There is no such cross participation of knowledge. So my I mean, I would like you to comment on that. And what critical role does you think that indigenous knowledge can play in terms of participatory health or creating a strong ecosystem where communities can empower themselves with self-care or community care?
This is very interesting question in that sense, because see, as you rightly pointed out, in that sense, community care is very important in that sense, and we have recently seen in the pandemic time this basically cross-discipline exchange was very much less, and we have a long debate. I don't want to go in that political debate which was happening during that time, the debate versus Ayurveda versus Western medicine and other kind. But what can this indigenous community can contribute to this kind of situation, and how can they enrich the knowledge system per se? So first, the first step is that we have to first explore this knowledge system, because and then we can come to the conclusion what kind of role they can play in that sense. So to explore those knowledge system, because these are the community which are their if you compare the population dynamics of the demography, it's very less in number, and it's very diverse, because every indigenous community have their own medical system, their own belief system. So first we have to identify the unique feature and how they do self-caring in that sense, like self-medical system, how they do deal with their everyday day-to-day life practices. Because some time back I was reading one paper, and that paper was very exciting in that sense, because the paper talks about how can we implement hunter-gatherer food habit for ourselves to get less susceptible to this disease and all. So basically, so in that sense, their lifestyle, their way of living is itself what you call a knowledge system for the outside community, in that sense, to how they can be sustainable, and how can you lead a life which is more in that sense healthier manner, in that sense, in more close to the nature. So and then there comes this knowledge system, because when I was discussing with those people, they have many times they told that they have many medicinal plants which has not been used in even Ayurvedic tradition. They are not being used. So to explore those knowledge system, which are the medicinal plants which are not included or not being used or not being practiced in the Ayurvedic or other medical tradition, and bring the features and do some more research, and we can integrate. It's not like that I am only a skeptic about. We can integrate the biomedicine. We can do more research, the scientific research of the plants, their qualities, their and then come that how can whether this kind of the plant they are using for themselves are useful for others also. So in this way we can see that they have a lot to contribute in that sense. But again, the question is that we have to reach out to them and make them knowledge system, make their knowledge system be reachable for others also. So we have to be a bridge in that sense, build a bridge, and that for building a bridge we have to find out an innovative way to deal with that. Because it's very much a serious problem in that sense. Thank you so much. This is what I have to say. I don't know whether I have answered your question clearly, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your answer. And I just, just seeing the topic's headline, it's also remember me all similar to one of the quotes that's given by Karl Marx. So once he is told that the communism must be advanced in order to make sure that there is a one phase in a life or society where the communism itself not going to be necessary for the community to empower itself. So we can also expect we have to also see there is times where the doctors has to be also unnecessary in terms to keep up the health and to empower the communities itself. So that's also critical in that way. So let me add one more thing into this, if we have the time. Just I also feel that there is an inherent features of some of the philosophical predominance of West or industry, post-industrial civilization that has been made when we approach towards, in special with communicable disease. If you just see the way that we are now managing the pandemic, we have human beings and we are considering enemies as viruses. So we have a warlike phase when we say that we have to make a warlike narrations, and we have to make all our weapons in order to make sure. So that narration comes up in with the lines of the ideas that is being that is being shaped after the post-industrial, or what you can say as post-globalization era, where there is more competition rather than cooperation or sharing of values on it. So in that critical instance, when we approach to the health and everything, the predominant philosophy of the West, or the predominant philosophy that drives in the science itself, communicates like everything is like an external thing, or in terms of virus, it is moreover like a war that the civilization has to put on a war to manage it. But if you see the traditional system or the philosophy of traditional medicine, the problem is more like an inherent feature. So if you have an inherent feature, we are not accustomed that to solve in more dynamic way, because if you take an example of climate emergency, we have a climate emergency, but if you observe the response to it, our civilization to it, it's like a cold response that we have. When we announce an emergency in Athalora aspect, we have a dynamic response. We will come to know that we will be responding all that towards in a rapid response. But when we see that a climate emergency is being announced, there is totally no response or a cold response. That is because of that we are considering it as an inherent problem, and the inherent problem that we cannot solve because of there must be proper change in the way that we see it towards the ecosystem or our worldview. So these will challenge our current society, our current implication of the science and whatever it may be. So my point is that even when we are adopting towards a pluralistic health system, that is going to be more challenging in terms of current epistemology or current way that we are moving towards building up our civilization and everything. So I think we have to be critical enough to in our daily practice of science to make it more critic in order to shape it on more that reflects into our change of worldview, our ecosystem in terms of be more inclusive. So I feel that in that aspect our traditional knowledge can give more insight.
Thank you so much for this nice response in that sense. Thank you so much.
Bensi here. I would like to ask something, if I may.
Yeah, of course. Please go ahead.
The presentation was really informative. Thank you. I was just thinking how I could sense like a paradox in the presentation. You started off by saying and that traditional systems, indigenous systems of knowledge, and their healing practices are very person-centric and context-specific. So they have their own system of perceiving health and illness and their own system of healing practices, which is very person-centric and context-specific. But then towards the end, you ended on a note that we have to sort of codify and take it towards globalization. And the very essence of globalization is to sort of, and it's undoing that context. And that I think is a paradox in itself. How do we sort of where do we draw a line? And especially in the context of, given the scenario that we have seen so much biopiracy and so much cultural imperialism going on, how do we protect them while at the same time maintaining the essence of such systems of medicine?
Yeah, sorry if you feel in that way, because what I was trying to say is their model, how they operate the knowledge is very person-centric. But for example, suppose I am a member of community and I know the medicine, but I can give the medicine to the community member, the other community member who are in the need. If I can give the member, which is a knowledge system, which my knowledge system can be useful for my community member in that sense, for one community member, or you have seen the network graph where the inter-community exchange of knowledge is happening in that sense. So the knowledge, gaining the knowledge, personal knowledge, acquiring process can be very person-centric, experience-based, individualistic in that sense. But the outreach of knowledge system, which I have seen in the case study also, but for example, care, when we talk about the when community member comes together and then they decide and then they heal, then there is a discussion happening we are seeing here. And then we see that there is an exchange of ideas and knowledge is going on there. And then that is benefiting the community member or the individual of the community or the family of the community in that sense. So I'm trying to bring of the knowledge, how they acquire the knowledge, but utility, the utility of knowledge system can be outreached to this like other community outside the community itself also. It need not to be localized within itself until unless they want it to be. If they want to take it to the further level, to take it to the larger audience, take it to the larger people, we should do that because they have the unique knowledge system and we should use that knowledge system, because we have used this kind of knowledge system before also, which was very community centric, but now it's been practiced and it's been highly acknowledged by the other community also itself. So I was talking in that sense, but I'm sorry if you feel in paradoxical sense, because I might not be clear that time, but now I think I'm clear in that sense. So,
yeah, but I was just wondering if there is like, where do we sort of like, if you can add on that, throw some light on that, where do we sort of figure out if us spreading this information and is not going to sort of take away from the context specificity of it? Because even within tribes, you've mentioned yourself that different tribes have different ways of using similar, say plants for different healing practices. So again, there's context specificity even then. So when you spread this knowledge, far and wide, then how is it that we are going to sort of maintain that person-centric approach?
yeah, again, this is very important point. That's why I brought this point, that we have to not be very like centered within the what you call framework. We have to integrate other framework. For example, a certain plant A is used by a community. For example, I'll say that Chola Naikal, and the same plant is used by Arnadan. There is a possibility, and it's not possibility. There is happening that the same plant by Chola Naikal is used for the different disease, and the Arnadan is used for the different disease. Then here comes the knowledge. Here comes the research part. The research is more important in that sense. As an outsider, if they want to, if they are agreeing to share the knowledge system, then we can do more research, and that's why we don't have to be just within the self of, and we don't include the research is also. We can include the biomedicine research or the geology, botany, or the knowledge of those kind of discipline, and do research and see, figure out that medicinal plant, how can, and what all qualities that medicinal plant are having, and what all qualities it can be used for, or with a mix of other medical. Because many of the medicinal plant, they are using solely, they are not mixing of the medicinal plant in their tradition. Mostly they are using single one medicine for one disease. So we can do research on these areas, and then we can make outreach more in that sense, make it more what you call vast, complex, and to this global scale. So this is what my interpretation or my worldview will be there to approach this knowledge system. But it's again all balls are there in their court, whether they want to do that or they want to preserve the knowledge system within themselves. If they want to do that, they have their right to do that, and we can't much help on that sense. Am I clear in that sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Ma'am, should we take more questions or?
Madhulika, I think, wanted to say something.
Yes.
Yes, I would like to comment at this point. A couple of things actually. Connecting the kind of response that Anil Vadiraju had given on Facebook, and also the kind of issues, very, very valuable inputs that Dr. Skandesh presented, and the manner in which we now really need to look at this debate and these ideas. I myself have now been in this debate for 30 plus years, and somewhere some parameters don't seem to change regardless of whatever we say or whatever we bring up. And I think that shift is very important, and we have to do it quite systematically and very doggedly. Otherwise, we are going to keep engaged in this very fruitless kind of discussion. First of all, I mean, when we are talking about these knowledges, let's be very clear that we begin by articulating a challenge to the hierarchy of knowledges. And to say that we are talking about different knowledges, biomedicine is one of many knowledges, regardless of its strength in terms of the support that it gets from the political economic structure as well as the state, right? So to say that, look, now after all this experience and exposure and so on, we need to now talk about knowledges which are competing knowledges. David Arnold wrote in 1988 that we need to see them as competing systems of knowledge. And that's something that we need to put very clear. And be very clear that this engagement with different knowledges and pitching them as competing, their epistemologies as competing with the epistemology of modern medicine, is not a postmodern fad in this country in any case. For many of us, it comes out of a very clear ground up experience of what knowledge works, what is available, and for whom. The chair is a medical doctor who has herself, used her own knowledge as well as expanded that entire frame to include a whole lot. And not today, she's done it for the last 35 plus years. So why, I mean, Ritudi started doing this work. I mean, I'm just using her as an example because she's right here and I've learned a lot from her. Ritudi started doing this before we knew who Foucault was. So let's be very clear, that social scientists may be obsessed with, fads and whatever. Those of us who are interested in, and mind you, Anil Bhattacharya is a friend of mine. So that's not the issue. We all know him. He was our colleague.
No.
Manin knows him well. But we have to understand that certain questions have to be answered in terms of what makes sense on the ground. This is something that Manindra and I have in common from Professor Mohanty, who taught us that keep your ear to the ground. You're much likelier to come up with perspectives and understanding than if you simply look at journals all the time. So that is where this is coming from. Let's be very clear. Second, the point that Dr. Skantesh said, I mean, very important, that now the meters of the discussion have changed. We are talking about climate crisis. And we are talking about what are going to be the knowledge systems that will enable us to deal with the extremely serious. And how right he is, that for all disasters, there's a sense of urgency. For the climate crisis, there seems to be no urgency whatsoever. So now there's a limit up to which, you can push on the state. But I have argued for a very long time that much of this country and much of the global south lives outside the pale of either the state or the market. When we say, so much work shows that, 70, 80% people still rely on a range of other knowledge system, non-medical knowledges for their everyday health, and that is their public health. So if that is the reality, that's the reality up from which we are working. And we find that, all this discussion that you're having about individual and community and the manner in which health and disease are negotiated between people, and with the kind of knowledge that is locally available, ecologically relevant, valuable, and the body in the constitution of the body, which varies. And this is a country with so many geoclimatic regions. So it's going to be, so in fact, modern medicine actually is coming around to the view that you cannot have a standardized understanding of either disease or treatment, and that it needs to be specific to constitutions, preferably individual constitutions, if not at least communities and areas and so on. So I think that when, for social scientists particularly who work on medicine or who raise these kinds of issues on medicine, trying to understand, I think you were right, Rakesh, and I like the fact that, you started with certain disclaimers. I think one of these disclaimers also has to be, please, can we not have questions on why are you following a postmodern fad? Because I'm not. And then to say that we are addressing, if anything, an extremely urgent set of issues. So if you're interested in engaging with those questions, then we can have a conversation. Otherwise, तो अब क्या बात करें ना फिर ऐसे लोगों से, है ना? तो ये मुझे लगता है बहुत बेहद जरूरत है, जो नॉलेज ट्रेडिशंस पे हम लोग जितने लोग अलग अलग तरीके से काम करते हैं. ज्ञान बहुत सीरियस बिजनेस है भाई. किसी एक लॉबी के हाथ में उसको पकड़ा देना बहुत बुद्धि का काम नहीं है. It is something that is owned by far more people than a certain lobby that makes medicines and a certain lobby that runs institutions or universities. And all of us who work in universities and have grown old in these universities know that this is hardly the space of either knowledge generation, knowledge creation, or knowledge dissemination, or knowledge practice for that matter. And the symbiotic relationship between knowledge generation and knowledge practice is something that we need to build into our arguments, build into our perspectives, which is what the best thing that the academic can do. So when you are going out there and you are actually understanding, collating, and put together all of this kind of information, Rakesh, I mean, you know what, I like your approach, because I find that, you know, you are keen to problematize the situation, which is what a researcher would do, but then you do not hesitate to do the unfashionable thing to say, but you know, this doesn't work, so this doesn't form part of my argument. I think that confidence we have to start acquiring, and to do away with these, you know, binary, non-binary, these binaries of, you know, medical knowledge, and to say that modern medicine is all rubbish. I mean, which sane person is arguing like this? We're not. It's about purani baatein ho gayi hai. You know, I think that we have to be quite clear about saying this, and to locate it in the also, I think, in the larger development project. What is happening when a tribal community is faced with the state which wants to develop them? When you're talking about relocating, why do every relocation is forced? It is completely imposed on them. Nobody asks them whether it's okay for them. जब एक जगह पे पूछा, तो नियमगिरी में कैसे उन्होंने खड़े होकर कह दिया कि नहीं भाई, you can't do it here. You may need aluminium to build your aeroplanes. Go find it somewhere else. We are not going to give it to you. Khatam baat. So there is, I mean, if you're talking democratic politics, as a political scientist, for me, that's a very important question. So democratic politics has to include the politics of knowledge and the politics of knowledge practice. So these are all these enmeshed issues which, you know, inevitably come up. And I see that, Rakesh, you are addressing many of them, and it's very interesting and exciting to look forward to. Thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you so much for this.
Very nice. Yeah, thank you.
I've learned a lot. I'll definitely include many of your perspective on my future studies and in my current study itself also. Thank you so much for your comments, ma'am. It's really helpful.
Dr. Thakur.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madhulika, for summarizing the perspective that we have been following since last so many decades now, I guess. And we grew together with this kind of idea, and that is what brings us together despite being far off due to pandemic protocols. I think there are 2-3 things that I would like to raise. One is that why do they not want to share their knowledge? Abhay is witness when we were discussing in his anthropology department about a friend of mine whose father has wonderful medicine for delivery, normal delivery of babies. He said that his father was not ready even to give that even to him. He did not agree to give it to his own son. And the reason I asked, the reason he gave that, probably you do not deserve to hold that knowledge. There is a strong ethics of the knowledge that is attached with this. Probably his father was indicating that you might start marketing it. I witnessed another example where somebody gave a medicine for piles, and which cured the piles within a week's time for permanently. But the fellow was having a medicine shop, and he was not ready to sell off that medicine. He said that it came in a dream to my grandfather, and he has told us not to do business on it, and therefore I can't sell it off. Otherwise, I could have earned a lot of money by selling this one medicine. And I witnessed this treatment. So I would like you to consider or tell me if among these tribal communities, ethics is also a concern. Ethics of medicine is also a concern, which is called in Indian intellectual tradition patrata. Knowledge के साथ पात्रता का एक बड़ा concept है, and that is very important. Symbolically, you know, Shani, there are two brothers. One has the patrata to hold knowledge. One doesn't have the patrata to hold knowledge. I think very symbolic. This thing. Both have similar knowledge, but there's a difference. This is one thing. Second thing is this ontological and epistemological question that you have raised. And over the years, I have been thinking about it. And interestingly, this idea came to me when I was talking to a Baz in Mayong, a practitioner in Mayong. Now I can say with more confidence that ontologically it seems the tribal traditions and also Indian intellectual traditions have accepted the idea of multiple layers of ontology, multiple layers of reality. And one of the layers is very abstract layer, which is beyond body, brain, mind. And that abstract layer is not inaccessible to them. When I was asking this person in Mayong that, what do you think of these practices? And by the way, Mayong people call themselves as practitioners of white magic, not of black magic as they were depicted earlier. White magic is the healing tradition. A large number of their practices are related to healing tradition actually, and they are also like collecting medicines from the forest and all that. So this person said that, there are layers of reality which nobody can access without sadhana. So sadhana is simply trying to develop that capacity to access that layer of reality, which now seems to very plausible to me also again, due to the argument that is coming from science of pluriverse, that we are not living in universe, but we are living in pluriverse. So there could be layers of reality which are absolutely inaccessible to us, but some people might develop that capacity to access that. I'm just indicating towards this. I have more deeper argument on this. I have done some work in last couple of years on this. Second thing is this epistemological difference. This is also, I think, now acceptable that within the philosophy of science, the debates within the philosophy of science, that the traditional epistemology of science, traditional means the epistemology of the modern science, Newtonian epistemology of science, is no more sustainable. And there are three stages. One stage was when people said regularity is a necessary and sufficient condition for being science. Second stage when they said regularity is necessary but not sufficient condition for being science, that is Popper. And third stage when they said regularity is neither a necessary nor a sufficient condition for being science. So there could be generative mechanisms that we need to catch. So, and therefore there are multiple layers of ontology and there are relative epistemologies. Any effort to reduce all ontologies to one epistemology would be disastrous. For instance, that if the physicists are saying that with the methods of physics we can understand consciousness, that would be disastrous, and it has been proved disastrous for more than once. So I think my answer to Anil Vadraju would be that let us get into the philosophy of science debate from where idea of postmodernism has emerged. And postmodernism moves towards relativism, but there is another way of handling that where you are saying that there are multiple layers of ontologies and epistemologies and they are interrelated but not reducible to each other. And it is entirely possible that a knowledge practicing community may have access to another layer of epistemology or ontology which we don't have, the other people don't have, or other community doesn't have. So this is entirely possible, and I can see this. Recently, I went to Rishikesh and made one of my friends, Madhulika knows him, Satya Mishra, who has become a sannyasi now, and he is reading traditional texts. So we had long debate on this layer of ontology, and I was asking, why are you getting it? What is so new in this? So this is what he was arguing, and I see an element in this argument. He says that to claim that all knowledge is lying with us would be disastrous. But it would be possible that there are certain layers of ontologies which we are easily accessing and which other people will take time to access. That has to be assessed and negotiated. So that brings us to a possibility of democratic negotiation between knowledge traditions. And that is what I think you are also claiming, that there's a plurality of knowledge traditions and there should be democratic negotiation, which means we are not advocating relativism. we are asking for a dialogue, and dialogue without power, without domination of power. I think that's what we are suggesting. So that is the.
Can I come in for 1
Please,
minute,
please.
Manind?
Yes.
Just to fill in a small thing here. It's a very major thing which nobody discusses. But let's say in Ayurveda, because we've had an Ayurvedic doctor here. In the field of Ayurveda, practitioners are also researchers, and so many of them have systematically worked with medicines, with treatment regimens to establish evidence, but not according to the parameters or the epistemology of biomedicine. Because controlled clinical trials, the parameters are all established by biomedicine. And the insistence, what you're saying, of reducing different ontologies to one kind of epistemology. And Ayurvedic physicians have systematically shown that if you were to judge the ontology of Ayurveda according to the epistemology of Ayurveda, you can give evidence as to how something happens. Now, that's all you're interested in knowing. And no Ayurvedic doctor worth their salt is claiming that what they are doing is magic. They have an epistemology, they have an ontology. I mean, give them, and they have taken the opportunity, and there is experimental work, there is systematic putting down of records, there's publication of their material, and the debate in the media as well as by the modern medicine or biomedical fraternity keeps on going on with the debate as if this whole knowledge base does not exist. There's complete marginalization of extremely sophisticated modern research on traditional Ayurveda, and people behave as if it doesn't exist. So what you're saying, Manindra, is something that Ayurvedic physicians have done and established. And the funny thing is, they have engaged the National Institutes of Health in the US to say, look, I mean, I will do a clinical trial, but I will do a clinical trial according to the parameters of Ayurveda. I will not do it according to your parameters. So my parameter will take 6 months to establish that rheumatoid arthritis medication I can give, and your methotrexate may take only 6 weeks, but that's okay, fine. You do it in 6 weeks. I will do it in 6 months. And that is what is going to be my evidence. You have to take it. And they published it also. They funded it and they published it. So this contestation and this negotiation, this hard-fought negotiation has happened. We need to bring it into the discourse. I mean, I've written on this and systematically analyzed this and so on. And I think that this is what needs to come into the social science arena of, where we are discussing philosophy of science as well. Sorry, I just wanted to compliment what you were saying.
Thank you. I think, I have two more issues and two questions to Rakesh. One is that, what is the possibility of loss of knowledge once we try to document the traditional knowledge? But that is one of the fear I think people have, because it's more holistic in the sense it has it considers more facts than merely some enumerated things. Like the behavior, like the face, like the dream, and so many things. So is it possible that they are not interested in documenting, as documentation might lead to loss of some of the important vital aspects of the medication system? Second thing is that the property right, intellectual property right. The intellectual property right of the modern system only considers individual as the owner of the property right. A collective property right, I think Kerala government has introduced, and that is the only state which has introduced intellectual property right for the medicines, the tradition. But has Kerala government also acknowledged the medicine system of these people and provided them intellectual right protection? This would be my another question. And third thing, I wish my student Neelam Karkata would have been there, who is doing his thesis about the ecological knowledge system of the tribals and a possibility of its contribution to the larger debate on environmental crisis. So I think this connecting, let me put it like this, like we have to insist that we are not for particularism, but we are for constantly emergent universalism. And therefore dialogue that Professor Banerjee was talking about, I think this dialogue is extremely important to insist on this, that you have to think of new universal, and that will be constantly evolving. I think it's a permanently emergent universal instead of being particularity of the postmodern kind of solution. I think that is what you are also suggesting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, ma'am. I don't know what to say. It's like for very enriching for me. I have learned a lot during this discussion. And just to respond to your question, sir, the documentation part, what you said is very, very correct. They are hesitant to document this knowledge system because they have this because their knowledge, the worldview is such that they can't what you call materialize, or in the form of, in the tangible form, they cannot even, they can't write, they can't speak in that sense, they can be recorded in that sense. So there is really, and the important part is that we have seen, my observation was there, it is not just happening, it's right now happening, because I have seen the three generations in the community. The first generation in the community, with very old people, they are not no longer going to the forest and all. Then I'm seeing the second generation people who are in the forest, they go in there and they're constantly negotiating with the sedentary lifestyle. And there is a third generation, the childs, who has born and brought up in the sedentary lifestyle. And in the contradiction among their worldviews is very much exciting in that sense, because the older generation people, they have a very strong belief in that sense, whereas the younger generation, the child, because they have exposed to this modern education system, because education system has a major role to play in that sense. And now this community, since they are forced to settle in the settlement area in the sedentary life, and they Western whatever called the education system we are following, because their education system pedagogy was not what we call the institution based pedagogy. Their pedagogy was based on experience based pedagogy, where they go and learn in the field, they go and learn along with their elders. But what happens when we introduce this system, language, and their other things, so now they are also a little bit skeptic about their own belief system. So here comes this, the problem is not just to what you call their fear. Even community within themselves also have a doubt, the self-doubt, the knowledge doubt they are having, because they have exposed to this knowledge system, which they are molded in such a fashion where they are having initial seeds of what you call doubt in their mind for their own knowledge system, own practice, because their lifestyle has changed. Now they have no longer to go in the field, so they have no learning experience from the field, which was the very base of their knowledge system itself, the acquisition of knowledge system. Since their experience has changed, so their belief system has also changed, and their belief system has changed, so everything has changed because of this. And just for one transition, being nomadic, being a hunter-gatherer, to being a sedentary life, and this has made this whole change throughout this generation, and it's happening throughout it's not just true for the community in the Kerala or the community in the Assam. It's all over them, because I was studying in the tribal communities of Madhya Pradesh and Bastar region, in the Maharashtra. They all have this kind of problem, because the younger generation of the community member itself are no longer in that sense interested to learn that knowledge system, and to basically, for them, documentation was to pass on the knowledge system to the next generation, so that knowledge will be kept safe. But here itself is not happening, because the process itself got disrupted because of the many kinds of practices which is induced by the government or the forced by the government, what you say. So in that sense, so yeah, what you are saying is very, very correct and right, sir. Regarding IPR, I'm not very sure that they are giving the tag to this geolocation tag for this IPR, for this community knowledge system, but definitely they are their knowledge system are under the purview of IPR, and then Kerala Forest Tribal Research Institute, KFR, and as well as the Kritarth, they all are doing a nice job for the people to basically give the people who deserve, or to give the community who has the ownership of the knowledge system, the IPR tag.
Can I just take half a minute more?
Yes, sir.
Two things. One, that I met a doctor in Andaman, Dr. Ratna Chandra. I don't know if you are aware of him. he has been interacting since last 30 years with this Jarawa tribe. And he has very interesting things to say on the work you are doing. So you should get in touch with him. He has a couple of books on that also.
If you have said your email ID, I'll write to you.
I will send, yes, I'll send you his details. And second, that Abhay, is there any such kind of effort in Jharkhand to protect the knowledge tradition of the tribal communities in Jharkhand?
Yes, sir. Even according to the the government initiative, which they are now, which I observed last year, a couple of months ago, that even the government is interested in it, and the government, particularly this was central government, but particularly the government of Jharkhand has not taken any kind of initiative. But this Vasvi Kudu, which I spoke about, and the group of medicine men who are now who have formed a union and keeping things unto themselves. So there is already an effort to it, but documentations are as such, it hasn't happened, and we would be taking the lead once the corona subsides or cools down a bit. I think we'll be working on at our documentation center.
Thank you. That's it.
Ayushi, if you would like to ask your question.
Yes, ma'am. हम यही जानना चाहते हैं कि झारखंड में करना चाहे तो कैसे शुरू करेंगे. झारखंड मीनिंग लैंड ऑफ फॉरेस्ट.
I think Abhay sir will be the right person to answer this question, because I have no experience in Jharkhand and there are tribal community there, what you call the system there. So in that sense, I think Abhay sir might respond. Sir, do you have to say?
She is actually my student. Ayushi, come again, beta. What's your question? क्या पूछना चाह रहे हो?
सर क्वेश्चन ये है कि हम ये झारखंड में शुरू करना चाहे तो कैसे शुरू करेंगे. झारखंड में मीन्स लॉट्स ऑफ फॉरेस्ट means land of forest.
Okay. Rakesh ji, I think this question is directed to you. Actually, she means to ask. She is. I think she is inspired. But I hope you are very inspired by Rakesh ji's talk, and she wants to take certain similar kind of initiatives, because Jharkhand being the land of forest, and the forest resources, medicinal resources. So
I'll tell you my experience.
Young anthropologist, so. Okay.
Yeah, I'll share my experience. What I have undergone through that. See, for my experience was that when I approached this community, these people are living in deep inside the forest. Like to reach to this community, every day I have to walk for 35 kilometer to 25 kilometer to reach to this community. Tribal welfare, to the SP police, vigilance, and all these things. So that's why I told that every state has their own policy in that sense. So I'm not very much aware of what kind of policy Jharkhand government is subscribed to and how but you can start this research firstly, but you have to do a very extensive literature survey on which community you want to do research and why do you have selected this community. That is much more important in that sense, because unless the goal is clear, why do you want to do this research and what do you want to do research on this community, and then comes the permission, because being their forest department under the control of forest department, or there are other restrictions are there. So this comes the later part, but you can approach the standard procedure is you have to either most of the district you have to take permission from the respective district collector or the sub collector to get permission to enter the tribal land, and then you make you go through the ethical consideration of all knowledge you have, like from the university or a department to whatever you want to going to ask, and then they contact those people whether they want to say, they get their consent and do start this following this methodology. This is a basic framework which I have followed, like basically explained, but it is not been this is ideal or universal in that sense, because every research has their own approach. Methods is very different. I have took a different method. You might have to take a different method. I have taken the case study method or the ethnography. You might have to take some other different method. And for different method, you need a different kind of approach and different kind of permission from the government itself. For example, I'm not going to collect any biomedical sample like for the medicinal plant as that sense. So I don't have to go for those permissions in that sense. But for you, if you want to collect the medicinal plant, then you have to go for another kind of permission in that sense. So you have to look through what is the administrative procedure to go in the forest and then encounter with the people which you want to do research. I hope I was some help in that sense.
So should we wind up for the day? If yes, So, on behalf of the chair, as she's asked me to, I would like to thank Rakesh for the presentation. And as clearly everybody has benefited and enriched from your presentation, particularly being so systematic. I would like to thank Dr. Thakur for always encouraging young minds like Rakesh, me, and many more through the Foundation for Creative Social Research and Knowledge and Practice Group to present our work and ideas, even if it's in the upcoming stage, to give us a platform. And thank you, sir. This is a very heartfelt thank you. And in the end, to all the members who were till the end, Madhulika ma'am, for your intervention, for staying till the end with us, and to others also, to Abhay sir. So thank you everybody for joining us today. And we look forward to more sessions in the coming months. And please, if you have to follow up with our schedule and program, you can drop your email ID and I can add you in our mailing system for future events and programs. Thank you.
I'd just like to take one moment to thank everybody. Thank you, Madhulika ma'am, for your insights. Thank you so much. I've been interested in knowledge. Thank you, Thakur sir, for you. Without you, I think it is not have been possible itself. So thank you for conceptualizing this platform. Thank you so much. And thank you, Abhay sir, and thank you, Ritu ma'am. She is not here, but thank you, everybody. All of your discussion, like younger scholar like me, has like immense, and I'll definitely get in touch with all of you, ma'am, for your future, for my future work and suggestions. Thank you so much for being here and for patiently listening me and giving me beautiful suggestions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rakesh. Thank you, Madhulika.
Rakesh, you missed Shalja actually.
Yeah, Shailaja, sorry, I'm so sorry. And thank you,
Okay,
Shailaja, for
ended now.
making this possible. I'm so sorry for that.
Good evening, everybody.
No, I think he has thanked everyone 4 times over. So I think that's fine.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Literally,
you.
it was
Thank
very,
you,
very
Madhulika.
enriching
Thank
for
you.
me.
Thank you for watching the video. Do like and share our video. For more seminars and talk, please subscribe to our channel. If you have any questions, comment on the video and don't forget to press the bell icon for future updates.